Oh yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, whatever time you're listening to us. I am Mark Spellman, and that is Chris Schrade. We are the Athlete Hackers. Welcome back to the
Today,
podcast, and Chris is going to go.
today we've got a very special guest, someone I've known for a long time, Dr. Brett Denkin, sports psychologist and life coach. I've known Dr. Brett for about 12 years now, and I sat with him for a while, got some coaching for myself. He has done some martial arts with me, and I also got the honor to teach two of his nephews for about 2 or 3 years. So thanks for coming on, Dr. Brett.
Awesome. Glad you guys have me here. Fantastic.
Yeah, so we'll get to Dr. Brett in a minute, but before we do, I want to talk about the last podcast we had, which was a stellar one. Mark, why don't you get us into that?
Yeah, we had Charlie Melton on from the Baylor men's basketball strength and conditioning, the director of strength and conditioning for the men's Baylor basketball team. Sorry, new voice.
National champion men's.
Yeah, national champions. They had a good year. Went over a lot of things with Charlie. As kind of one of the running themes for this season, it's been, where would you like your athlete to come in as far as being prepared for the collegiate world? Would you like somebody that has experience in the weight room, or somebody that's not had or doesn't have that much experience? And Charlie kind of went on the side of somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience, so he can take them and kind of mold them into the way that he wants them to be. But also, once again, it's been a running theme, I think, since we started the podcast, is in order to be a good coach, you need to meet the athletes and the individuals that you're working with where they're at, and then you can go from there. So,
That being said, though, he did mention that he does train his own sons and daughters. One of them, being 15 years old, has been training for 8 years. So what does that make him, 7 when he started, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that he mentioned, and by the way, if you listen to that podcast, you have to take notes. I'm still taking notes. I'm going to go listen to it a third time. And when we come back again, I'm going to give you the list of things that you need to look up from that podcast. But one of the things he said was, not all people listening here have a strength coach, nerdy science dad at home to teach them. But you got one close, and that's this podcast, which features many strength coach, nerd dads, and other professionals.
Nerd dads, that's funny.
and you can get a dose of that and listen to this podcast.
I think one of the big things in the profession, and obviously a sidetrack before we get to you, Doc, is that the years of us being just kind of stigmatized as just big meatheads is come and gone. Most of the people in my profession, they have an advanced degree, they have years of experience, they have multiple certifications after their name, and it's one of the things that that I'm trying to make aware to those that are in the hiring practices, that most coaches in the athletic department, there are only probably a couple that have advanced degrees. They're usually in the sports medicine and in the athletic performance realms, where they have the advanced degree, where the head coaches might not even have a degree in whatever field that they're coaching in. So just trying to bring to light that we are the side of the athletic department that sees these kids on a regular basis. We usually spend more time with them than their head coach, and we usually know them better than pretty much anybody else in the athletic department. So
yeah, good stuff.
That's all I got.
Awesome.
Dr. Brett, take us into a little bit of who you are, where you've been, and what you're currently doing.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I have a doctorate in psychology. I like to tell people I do a hybrid of life coaching, business coaching, psychology, and sports psychology. So I've been working with athletes and entrepreneurs for decades now. I'm 30, 40,000 hours in. So, when parents call me and they want me to work with their son or daughter, I just say I got my end of this equation covered. So I have a lot of confidence in guiding people to take their game to the next level, or to like really start to master present moment time at a high level. So we do a lot of like off the field training for on the field training, because I'm a big believer that the more we can train our mind, meditation, mindfulness, visualization, breath work, positive self-talk, all kinds of communication skills training, and so on. It's all oriented towards like teaching people how to be more and more in the here and now. And as you know, Chris, as a martial artist, if you're not in the here and now, you're getting your ass kicked.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So so I'm working with kids and adolescents and athletes and adults at all levels, wherever they're at. We're going to get creative and interesting, and a little bit out of the box, and teach people how to do life relationships as well, do life at a pretty high level.
Give us a little insight to the idea of sports psychology and how you apply it in your practice.
Look, I think everybody can benefit from looking under the hood. So what is a sports psychologist? Is someone that, is helping people, look at what it is in their life that they're, challenged by. And, a lot of athletes have anxiety either on the field or off the field. Most athletes have performance issues, and they also have personal issues, right? Relationship issues and communication issues. So, being able to help people with across the board, all of that, I think is invaluable. So that's a lot of what I'm doing. If we're teaching people how to be great communicators, we're helping the athlete, right? If their relationships are better, and they have less drama and distraction as a result, or zero drama and insane amounts of support. That's really going to help you on the field, right? So again, it's this sort of on the field, off the field. It's like a 24/7 way of living, right? You even look at, things that you guys look at, like sleep patterns and so on, and, what kind of food you're eating, and, what kind of substances you're taking, right? So we're dealing with, we're looking at all of it, basically.
So I assume there's a difference between someone who's having mental deficit issues versus someone who's trying to squeeze more performance out of themselves from a mental level. Is that accurate?
Yeah, mental deficit issues. There are people that struggle with anxiety and depression. Naomi Osaka came out recently, talked about her social anxiety and getting uncomfortable in front of the media and so on. And I think that that's more prevalent than most people realize. So I think almost everybody's dealing with something, addiction issues. I often say that, pretty much everyone is addicted to something. And if it's not a substance, then you're addicted to thought, right? You're thinking too much, right? So part of the reason why I spend so much time with meditation and mindfulness practice is we're teaching people to think a lot less and direct their thoughts, right? So that, you're not, overthinking. There's a tendency to overthink, I think, in our culture in general, right? And most of the time, that's not a good thing.
Are you finding that most of the people who have mental issues when it's applied to sports, is it coming from their childhood or the experiences they've been through, and you have to do some unwinding with that in order to get them past it?
Yeah, I'm not a huge, I was trained analytically, as a grad student a long time ago. So I certainly have the background in training, but I'm a present moment time guy. So we try to do our best to tackle the here and now, whatever that is. Do we go back at times into someone's past and look at some of the patterns? Yeah, we do that if and when necessary. But we're not going to dwell too much in the childhood of the past. It might have been like part of the catalyst for some of the trauma that people experience. And so we're certainly going to look at that a little bit and maybe start to work through some of that, especially to identify patterns that are interfering with your ability to either perform or deal with relationships or deal with your coaches. If you have a lot of rebellion issues or whatever, and you're not that coachable, that's a problem, right? So where's that coming from? Well, maybe your father was a jerk or your mom was impossible or something. So yes, we'll look at that. and we'll address it, but we're really going to tackle the here and now. How are you doing? How is that behavior, affecting your, day-to-day life? And now we have to make a decision. Are we going to change it? And how are we going to change it? Right. Same thing with addiction stuff, right? I mean, too many kids are smoking too much weed, for example, right? And that's going to interfere with performance, right? It's going to interfere with your mental set, right? Your ability to focus, your ability to be motivated. So what do we want to do about that, right?
So that being said, kind of segueing into meditation, because I know you're a Jedi Master meditator.
Yeah, I don't know about Jedi Master, but I can certainly meditate anywhere at any time. I'm right now in front of you guys. Doesn't matter.
Is that something you're incorporating with your clients?
Every single person on this planet that I get my hands on, we teach them how to meditate, and then I harp on that. I got some tennis players now that are top 100 in the country, for juniors or whatever, and they're meditating every day. And all the golfers are meditating every day. Football players, hockey players, baseball players, we got every single one of them meditating. I'm on that like you wouldn't believe, just because it really does create neurological changes in your brain. If you want to create neuroplasticity and you want to like experience life at a more present moment time, deeper, more profound way, and have a greater understanding of other, meditate, right? So I'm a huge believer. Yeah. And almost all martial artists are going to meditate, right? I mean, if you're a martial artist and you're not meditating, I'd be surprised, right? That would shock me.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. A lot of people don't meditate. Certainly, just like yoga, it's a way to get into a more meditative state. I think that after you train is probably the best time to do it.
Well, especially for people that are wired ADD, the ones that are more ADD-ish, they have a hard time sitting still, or just, their attention wanders. I have almost all those people work out first, right? You do your workout first, then you meditate. Someone like me that's been meditating forever, it's a non-issue. But when I first started in my 20s, I was a good athlete and very physically oriented. It took me months to be able to sort of train myself to be able to sit still, and hang in meditative states. I mean, I had so much, what I would call unconscious resistance, like where my body would just kind of freak out on me. And I was able to work that through. Most of the kids that I'm coaching don't have that kind of resistance, just a little bit, right? I even have a 9-year-old now that I'm working with. He's a hockey player. He meditates twice a day. He has no sleep issues and no anxiety anymore. And one of the things I say playfully is, after I do a first session with people, is if I get hit by a car tomorrow and I'm gone, and you meditate every day the rest of your life, you got full value out of this experience. Right?
What's the technique look like? What are you teaching?
I'm just doing a simple, like, I have people close their eyes and what I call pick up the breath. So we're going to pay attention to the in breath, the out breath, one or the other or both. When thoughts come, that's okay. We're not trying to control thought. We're simply coming back to our focus, which is the breath. But if you notice, even when I talk about it, I can go right into a meditative state. I'm not using the breath. I'm using a chakra point, which is just an energy center, right? There's crown chakra, third eye, throat chakra, heart chakra, and so on. And when we use these, chakra centers, like, the energy centers or whatever, this might be a little bit more advanced. So, some people can use a candle, they can use, an app or whatever, Headspace, Calm, whatever, or meditation music. For years, I meditated with a Buddhist and we use meditation music. I just have an ability to sort of what I call rest in my third eye, and it's just really comfortable. And then what that does is it gives you, what'll happen with me is I'll have no background thought, like zero. I can have a conversation, doesn't matter. There's no background thought. It helps you make a pot, under pressure, and what it does is it gives you more present, it clears everything.
And with the chakras, I know some people tend to think that's a little bit esoteric, and that's where they
Yeah.
miss sometimes. But isn't there some kind of scientific parallel where, you know, that's those particular centers are where bundles of nerves come together in the body?
I haven't brushed up on the science of the chakras, and it's been decades since I've researched that, so I'm not going to be able to answer that scientifically. But I can say that in general, what meditation is doing is it's decreasing neurological activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes anxiety and fear and trauma and so on, and it's increasing neurological activity in the left prefrontal cortex, which is where happiness exists on a neurological level. And that's why you want to meditate. Societies that meditate more, like China or some of the Asian cultures, they don't do what we do in America, where 100 million people are on antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs, or anti-seizure drugs, or whatever drugs, right? They're not using, their healthcare budgets are probably 1/20th of ours per capita, right? And societies tend to be pretty healthy too. And if you look at longevity rates, they're similar, right? But their healthcare expenditures are like ridiculously low compared to ours, because those are cultures that are using Tai Chi and other forms of sort of natural medicine. Our culture in general tends to orient people towards drugs as a solution, medication, and most of the time it's really not the right path, right?
So it's almost like there's an energy transfer anyways, even when you break it down like you did. I mean, you're taking neuron activity from an area of the brain that really could sap performance and putting it into an area that would enhance performance. Is that?
Yeah, but over time, what you're doing is you're actually, changing your brain chemistry. They've done a lot of research on this. So long-term meditators are going to not just be more present, they're going to be happier, they're going to be more empathic, they're going to be more understanding, and less prone to like impulsivity and things that non-meditators are prone to. Right. And then what you find is that the more you meditate, the less you want to drink and smoke. I still drink and smoke. It's like, I love to connect. I'm a connector type, but I don't, when I meditate a lot, I don't need it. Right. So it's just a choice socially. Right.
I also think
Yeah,
that
Mark.
one of the issues that we have in our country is that the stigmatism over mental health. Where if somebody says that they're dealing with a mental health issue, like Naomi Osaka or a Michael Phelps or a Kevin Love, everybody looks and goes, they look back at like, why are you having a problem, or what's wrong with you? And it's like, if you have a broken arm, nobody gets upset that you go get a cast put on that arm. But if you say that you're dealing with some mental health issues, or you're trying to be better mentally, some people see it as like, I'm going to say the word, but you're crazy. And it's really not the case. You're not crazy. You're just dealing with some things that, I've been open and honest and candid about my issues that I've had with my mental health over the last 2 years, in relationship to the physical issues that I was dealing with, and how not being able to do my physical activity on a regular basis was really affecting my mental health. And, getting into that point where I can meditate and I can do breath work and things like that have definitely helped me be healthier and more relaxed and more focused, and, as you said, more present to be where I'm at during those times. So
Yeah, that's well said, Mark. But I do think that our culture is evolving and changing. I've noticed it's much less so. There's so many people that reach out for a sports psychologist today versus 10 years ago. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I really have noticed a dramatic change. That like literally, it's just much easier for people. A lot of clients have no issue with the fact that they're seeing a life coach or a sports psychologist. They sort of, they feel positive about it. And I'm coaching, people all around the country, and people of different ethnicities and persuasions and whatever, right? And so that stigmatism around mental health is definitely changing and evolving, and it's going in the right direction for sure. And athletes like Kevin Love or Michael Phelps or Naomi Osaka, that's obviously helping.
I think one of the probably the first time that I came in contact or dealt with or used visualization is when I was a distance swimmer in college, and we would do some visualization of, like, lying there and being able to see yourself on the starting block, being able to see yourself swimming, trying, like, we almost got it to the point where we could see the race, and we would start the visualization practice. What time we wanted to swim, and we would time it and see how close we could get to that to our race time. And for myself, being a distance swimmer, the level of arousal, I needed to be really calm before my races. If I was really excited or in a heightened state because of the person I was swimming against, or if it was a big meet, I usually did not perform well.
Yeah.
Now, with the clientele that you're working with and the athletes that you're working with, have they been able to see the mind-body connection? And are they, I think it's one of those things that when everybody understands that they can unlock limitless potential once they can tap into their mental side of their physical being, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that, because most of us are not going to be Michael Jordan or Wim Hof, or, what I mean, or Michael Phelps. So I don't know how limitless it is. I have noticed that the D1 athletes tend to have more physical ability than the D3 athletes in general. They're bigger, stronger, faster, and they throw the ball a lot harder, or whatever the sport is. That said, yeah, I mean, the kind of group of people I'm working with, it's a self-selecting sample. The people that stay with you, right, are going to be open to your guidance, right? So the people that I'm working with, they're open to all this because they've decided to stay with the process. The people that either aren't open in the first place or aren't ready for what it is I have to offer, they vanish pretty quickly. And that's just the, part of the dance.
What do you think of?
Well, it's the same people. It's the same people that want to lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm like, we're fasting right now. Like I told my wife, just real quick, I told my wife, yesterday morning, that because I was watching a George St. Pierre video, whatever, how he cured himself through fasting of, like, some kind of disorder that he had. And I told my wife yesterday we're going to fast, and she was on her way to Costco, and she got bitter at me because she's competitive. Because I'm 20 years older than her, right? And she's like, I told her I'm going to be, leaner than her, and she's like, then I'm going to fast too, or whatever. But then she goes to Costco, and she's bitter at me last night. But my energy has picked up a lot from, I noticed, from that one day a week. We're going to play with this a little bit, but there's a lot of things you can do on this planet to elevate your game, right? Playing with, like intermittent fasting is just another habit that, can be successful for some people. I think more than anything, the openness, right? Some people are more open than others. And so I'm in a stage in my life where I don't coach people that aren't open, because it's not fun. It's not, we're not going to go anywhere.
What do you think about, what Mark said about actually specific visualization as a meditation versus like what you're doing in terms of focusing on, a particular area, or like?
Oh, I don't teach any of the kids I'm working with to use chakra points. So we just do the simple breath meditation, and eventually maybe they get more advanced. But we do a lot of work with visualization because that's super powerful. I tell everybody, Longshore in Westport, Connecticut is a Par 69 course, and I had the mental barrier of 70. That was a huge mental barrier for me for like a decade. I couldn't break 70. I would blow up on the 18th hole. And then eventually I shot a 66, and I did it not by hitting golf balls. I literally was playing once a week and not practicing, but I sat in meditative states and visualized shooting a 65 for a month. And then one day I went out there and shot a 66 and lipped out for the 65. And the second time I shot a 66, I did it by meditating the entire back nine. I'm behind my shades, meditating ferociously. And that's why I've seen recently Lexi Thompson blow the US Open, no meditative states or no real breath work. Her caddy didn't help her out and she just melted down, and then Louis Oosthuizen just blew the US Open for men's golf, on the 17th hole. He played so well and he just made the one mental error you can't make, pull it left. He could have bunted the ball to the right and he would have been fine. He would have probably wound up making a par, with a short hole for a pro. But he hit it in a hazard. And, so I'd love, the golfers like Phil Mickelson that are using visualization and meditative states. At 50 years old, he just won the PGA Championship. So every athlete I'm working with, we visualize and we work on that a lot.
I feel, and I could be completely ignorant about this, but I almost feel like the visualization it's kind of temporary. It'll help you maybe in the moment for that game versus a meditative practice where you're actually trying to get in a meditative state and you're changing the structure of your brain. It's more permanent.
Yeah, and I think that's well said on your part, Chris. But I'm not sure it's binary. I think both are like invaluable. But I often say there's no substitute for meditation, but there's also no substitute for mindfulness and visualization as well. But think about mindfulness practice. All you're doing is pay attention to your thoughts, your feelings, and your body sensations in a non-judgmental way throughout the day. And when you notice your mind is in the past or the future, you're bringing it back to the moment. That's something you want to live with. 24/7, you're like, I tell everybody, there's the way I was raised and the trauma I've been through in my lifetime. There's not a day I don't beat myself up in some way, but it's only for a second or two. And it usually only happens when I lay down at night, then you're more vulnerable or whatever. You lay down, right? You're not up and active or whatever. And then I'll have those, self-critical thoughts or whatever they are. And I just don't feed them energy because I pay attention to it and bring my focus back elsewhere. So what is that? That's a mindfulness practice, right? Then you have meditation, like you said, it's more formal, where you're training your neurochemistry over months and years, right? And then you have visualization that it's going to it's like a form of physical practice. The studies suggest that the brain's not really distinguishing between the visualization and the actual real practice. That's why visualization is so powerful. So when I'm sitting there for a month visualizing a 65 and everything and that smooth, effortless swing, I'm actually practicing, right? I wasn't doing physical practice. So I think all three are sort of like, if you want to elevate your game for real, I think all three are, invaluable. And like, I got this tennis player right now, she's in like the finals of a match. She's never won a tournament before. And we just started working together 2-3 months ago. And I'll find out later today whether she won or not, but she's going further already, and we just started, because I'm introducing her to a world of meditation and mindfulness and visualization and breath work, and the breath work is really invaluable, right? You get anxious, you want to be doing, 3, 4, 5 seconds in, 3, 4, 5 second hold, 3, 4, 5 second release. That, if you do that 13 times, you are going to calm down. Yeah. And if you think about certain sports, you need that.
Yeah.
And in martial arts, if you're on your back and you're getting choked, you need to calm down.
Yeah, there's no better substitute than just getting choked on your back over and over and over again. That has a way of making you meditative in the moment because you don't have a choice.
I only experienced that as a kid with my twin brother hundreds of times.
Lots of times, right?
Hundreds. I never did it formally, but man, did we beat the shit out of each other.
Yeah. Well, sometimes that's better practice than some martial arts. You hit or miss with some martial arts. Real street experience is better.
Yeah, especially when your twin is a triple alpha. He was so freaking aggressive and ridiculous.
I had a health scare about 9 months ago, and really more than anything that it kind of uncovered was anxiety issues. And I needed to really dive into meditation to get past it. And when I'm telling friends or whatever that I sit and I meditate for half hour, 40 minutes sometimes, they're like, "What?" They're like, they're like, "No way." They're like, "No, I can't. I could never do it. I couldn't even do 2 or 3 minutes." And I used binary beats. That's the route I went.
Got it.
What's your thoughts on that? Is it legitimate? The idea that you can take waves from the stereo of your headphones and kind of change your brain patterns from a
That reminds me of the EMDR, right? The eye movement desensitization and reprocessing techniques that some therapists use. I'm a big believer in whatever works for you. You try it, you try different things. And if that's the way you're wired or if that resonates with you, then you go with it, right? I'm not using that, like I said, I just, mostly use chakras and everything, but like, I don't think it really matters per se. What matters, especially in the beginning to middle phases of meditation, is like doing it every day, right? It's just, in the beginning, your martial arts training, you gotta, you want to practice every day. And then you start to refine your technique as you go. And you're, what I mean, maybe you're more oriented towards grappling, other people are more oriented towards boxing or kicking or whatever it is, right? So everybody sort of has their sort of strengths and weaknesses, but you got to find out really what works best for you.
Yeah. Let's change positions. We lost Mark. He's dealing
We
with the
definitely.
storm down where he
He's
is.
got Zoom issues.
He may.
That's why I use phone and FaceTime.
Let's change directions here. Let's talk about the psychology of injury. And it's something that's been on my mind recently because about 8 weeks ago, I was running. I was getting in really good shape. I ran 2 miles. And at the end of my run, I just happened to put my right leg down and I heard, and it was something on the inside of my knee. And, as it's starting to swell and the pain's coming on, maybe about 15, 20 minutes later, it started to seem real familiar. And that's because I had a similar injury. I think what I did was I think I pinched my cartilage on my medial meniscus, the inside of my knee. And I had that injury when I was a junior in high school. So, the whole time I'm kind of going back and forth between how I was thinking when I was 15 or 16 years old versus, what I was thinking now. And obviously the situations are very different. Back then it was in the middle of a basketball season. I have this pain and this inability to do what I need to do every day to go play basketball. And there's doctors telling me you've got a torn meniscus, you've got to get an operation. Fast forward, to now 43, my mindset is I'm not going to a doctor. I know what this is. I know how to heal it. I've been through this before. But, as I started to look up what the injury is, which is there's no nerves in the actual damaged part, right? It's your body's reaction. So the pain is coming from the swelling, not from the actual injury itself. And so as I'm thinking of that, I'm like, well, did I even make the right decision to get an operation when I was 15 or 16 years old? The timelines from, when I got my operation to when I returned, and from when I got injured when I was 43 and when I very gently tried to go back into running was about 5 or 6 weeks. So the timeline was the same, and I'm going, did I overthink that injury? And then the other part of it is, how do you get back to where you were? Because as I'm running now, my mind's on the injury. Is this going to happen again? And then, for other things, other activities, like if I'm playing basketball with my son, I can kind of control my running a little bit. But basketball is uncontrollable, right? There's all these cuts and movements, and you're doing, you're going laterally and you're jumping.
Yeah.
And so there's all these other components, but in my mind, there's always that possibility of getting injured again.
Yeah.
How do athletes toe that line? Or they're not going to overdo,
Yeah. I mean, this is, yeah,
or they're going to,
it's
but
a good
they've got to
question.
get back.
It's tricky. You're talking to somebody who's been injured many, many times. I've broken a lot of stuff and torn a lot of stuff. And I had shoulder surgery when I was in grad school in San Diego in the 90s. It's never been the same. Rotator cuff. I've had severe back injury, 12 years of chronic pain, really severe nerve damage to my low back and hip. I severely broke my wrist a year ago. I've broken my nose, I've broken ribs, I've torn like hamstrings and ligaments
This is
in my
on account of your
ankle.
brother.
Not all of it. I think I broke his nose, frankly, when I think about it. Mark, we're
Mark's back.
getting Mark back here. We're talking about how we recover from trauma or whatever, the injury. Look, training your mind again is part of the component, because one of the things I notice is I'm always paying attention to floors now because the break was so severe with the wrist or whatever. So we're going to have trauma responses, right? So there's a part of us that doesn't want to get re-injured. It's so important to our identity to be athletes and to, be physically active. So as we get older, maybe we have more wisdom and we're a little more mindful, and that's a positive. But again, what you're noticing when you practice mindfulness is you're noticing the mind going to the fear. And then what your job is now is to train your mind to come back into the moment. Because if you notice, not all the time, some accidents are just freaky and we have no control over them. Like I say, Bruce Lee would have broke his wrist in the situation I was in, right? It wouldn't have mattered, right? But there are times when we are tired or we aren't present. And those are more likely the times when we take that messed up step and we get injured, right? When we're overtired or we're using substances or whatever it is. And so I'm always sort of, like teaching people how to pay attention more and how to be more present and how to work things through. The way you work through trauma, in my opinion, is you teach yourself how to orient to the here and now so that the trauma doesn't have the energy, the space, right? To sort of, like take over you. Right. When people have anxiety and panic attacks, they wind up in ERs or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, it's not a heart attack. It's panic. But most people can learn how to control panic and never have a panic attack. Right. You can handle the fear through breathing techniques. Right. And by, self-talk and by bringing your focus back into the here and now and then breathing. I always talk about observing and breathing. So that's definitely something you don't have to live with. The sort of fear part you can minimize. Maybe there'll always be a neural pathway, a groove, because there was a trauma. But I'm a huge believer in using your instincts and your intuition and trusting, essentially no doctor per se. You don't automatically trust somebody in a white coat. You use your instincts and your intuition because you know your body better than he does. He might be able to identify a problem on an MRI, but you're going to most likely know what's best for you, especially if you get different opinions. So, using your gut, there's no substitute for in an educated way. You're actually getting educated opinions, but medical error is the third leading, cause of death in the United States. Maybe this year it'll be fourth because of COVID or whatever, but every year, 400,000 or 500,000 people die of medical error. Almost no one talks about that, right? Not so. Again, we have to use our instincts and our intuition in combination with these so-called experts to make, educated sort of like, decisions. And at the end of the day, we're still going to have to train our mind. Otherwise, the trauma will always run us, right? The fear of getting re-injured or whatever it is. Jerry Rice had to go through this, right? Remember, he was no good when he, like when he first came back, he wasn't himself from that, torn ACL. He lost a year. Yeah. And then eventually he became the best ever, right? Again, right? So.
Yeah, it's interesting because, for me, I'm 43 years old. I don't really need my legs. Well, I do, but when I get hurt, I can just drag it behind me and do what I have to do. But but for an athlete who's in season or about to go in season, they've got all this pressure to, heal quick and then get back on the field or the court, So I think your idea of having a mental practice and being here and now is even more important for people who are under that type of pressure with an injury.
Yeah, I don't think there's any substitute for training your mind on this planet. Right now we don't have, the limitless pill or whatever that is that just makes you superhuman. And until we have that limitless pill, I think you got to train your freaking mind. And the Buddha was talking about that 2,500 years ago. And then probably Jesus was talking about it and his message got distorted. that's my guess. But yeah,
I think you see this especially with the elite level athletes when they get injured, that they do find another avenue to get better, and they do go to the mindfulness and the meditation and the breath work, and they usually don't. I might be wrong on this, but because they're so physically gifted, a lot of times they don't get to that mindfulness and then meditation and the breath work until like the physical abilities taken away from them.
I think that's the vast majority. I think you're right, Mark. I think most are probably going to get to it because of an injury or a trauma or a failure. But then there's guys like Djokovic or Nadal or Federer that just are going to get there because they want to be the best ever. And they're so physically gifted. It's ridiculous, but they've realized that in order to get to the very, very elite levels, that's going to be totally necessary. Maybe Michael Jordan in the old days, drank a lot, and could get away with it, but not if you're, one-on-one on a tennis court at the highest levels, right? It's so ferocious, mano a mano, that those guys are, Federer's going to be meditate, and, Nadal and Djokovic, those guys. I know Djokovic is a big meditator. I don't know about the other two, but I'm sure they have to be. I couldn't see any other way.
Well, I mean, especially after he just won the last French Open, the other two are probably wondering what the hell he's doing because he's about to break.
Well, he's speaking like 6 languages and like he's definitely I call the super elite the out of bounds outliers. Like they're, because we live in a culture that sort of admires these people, puts them on pedestals or whatever, and and they are just like, they're Kobe Bryant is, when you hear all these stories about how anybody could be me, it's just bullshit. Anybody cannot be them because there's such a thing as called genetic high responders, right? There's been books written on this, and some people are just genetically high responders, right? So if they practice just as much as the next guy, they're going to respond way more favorably. So that interactive play builds your confidence, right? So it's actually both, right? You got things that other people don't have, right? And you're going to work harder. But why are you going to work harder? In part because your muscles are responding, right? So you get the confidence boost, right? You're getting results. So it's really interesting. And our culture in general doesn't really talk about stuff like that. We like to hear anybody can be me, Mark Cuban, or fucking, whoever it is. And it's not really true. If anybody could be Michael Jordan or Mark Cuban or Wim Hof, they would be.
Yeah.
And there's only one of them, right? So it is this fascinating interaction, but at the highest levels, I think you got to be pretty pure, especially like on a tennis court. If you're drinking at all, I don't think you're going to beat Nadal. I doubt Djokovic had a drink for a month prior to that match.
Yeah, he might not have had a drink in a couple of years.
Exactly. He's been playing number 1 in the world, playing at such an elite level. But they're doing a lot, right? Tom Brady's sleeping on probably $100,000 mattress in space pajamas, and and getting $1 million worth of work on his body a year, right? So that's amazing and it's great for us, but we don't have $1 million to spend on our bodies, so we better meditate more.
Yeah. What was it? It was you look at getting back to Nadal Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic, and you look at the elite level in any sport, and I agree with you. Not everybody can be them. You know,
No, I
you,
mean, that's
you
just
start your
silliness.
five, but you start your 5-year-old out on the tennis court hitting the ball against the wall. The reality of them getting to that level is very slim to none.
No,
No.
you know what? I think the best part about sports is trying to achieve that. Even though you're not that genetic masterpiece that's going to achieve those levels, attempting to is going to teach you so much and grow you so much more were you not to do it.
Yeah, but also learning from the failure and knowing when, when it's a cul-de-sac. Some athletes are just, no matter how great their attitude. I've met many of these and I've coached some of them. They work just as hard as freaking, Kobe Bryant did, just as hard, but they ain't making it. They're not making it. They don't
Absolutely.
have that gift or whatever. So they need to know when it's time to move on or whatever. And then I've met some athletes that were pros that I've worked with that, they didn't want that level of pressure and competition. It didn't fit their personalities. So, what I mean? They didn't want the pressure that came with being a professional athlete. And so for them, a different career path was actually a home run, because really at that level, top 100 in the world, whatever the sport is, you got to want it so bad it's crazy. And if you don't want it that bad, then two things are going on, right? Either you're not really a fit, or you're so genetically gifted that you can sort of get away with. Nick Kyrgios is so genetically gifted, he can get away with a shitty attitude. Now he's not going to be number one in the world, but he's still going to make $100 million over his career, right? And there are the Daryl Strawberries of the world or whatever that were so gifted they could get away for a little while, not forever. It always catches up to you with cocaine addictions or whatever it is. And then we blame their attitude, but sometimes it's complicated. I'm a psychologist. I like to understand other, right? And it's easy to be, I often say anybody can be critical and judgmental. It takes strength of character to be understanding. And some people struggle with addictions, and those can be genetically partially influenced, in the genes and also your early childhood. And it's complicated. Some people aren't going to make it, or they're going to so-called throw away their gifts, but society is going to be super judgmental about that when, their backgrounds are super complicated. Why do people choose shitty relationships? Well, that's kind of complicated, right? Has to do with how you were parented and, and the messages you received in childhood, and maybe even your DNA. Trauma in your DNA, by the way, can be multi-generational. If your great grandparents went through severe trauma, World War I or whatever it was, or Civil War, that's going to be in your DNA and you will suffer. And then people will judge you, in this lifetime when you've inherited some of these pain bodies, so to speak. So this world's an immensely complicated place. And some of us, people that go into psychology, like to understand it. And instead of being critical of it, help people work through it to the best they can. And not everybody is going to do that. Some people, it's just too much pressure to be a pro athlete.
Yeah. I think you bring up an interesting point, and I think just society in general needs to be more mindful about what other people are going through. We see these headlines, the media sensationalizes when athletes or famous people do something wrong, and everyone just takes the headline. No one reads into the story. No one does research. And you know what? There's far more interesting stuff digging down deep than just reacting off of the emotional headline or whatever the news is pushing about that person.
Totally. It's complicated, right? Why is it that people are impulsive, right? Well, your brain development is different depending on how you're raised. If you're raised, I worked at a Head Start program for several years as a mental health consultant. For those that don't know, Head Start programs, it's federally funded, preschool for kids that are economically disadvantaged, often Black and Hispanic, right? Inner city neighborhoods and so on, right? And those kids are raised in general, not all of them, but a lot of them are raised with no dad or different, father figures, or moms that are depressed, or, moms that are overwhelmed, and they're raised with violence in front of TV sets, and their brain development by the time they're like in, first grade is 2 or 3 years behind, your sort of, suburban kid that has every privilege, right? Now, what does that mean that their cognitive development is behind, neurological development is behind? It means they're more impulsive and they're wired that way, and it's not going to change. And then they have a crime issue at 17 or 18. Well, you got to go back to age 2, 3, or 4 when they're raised not safe, violence, TV, and, moms that are overwhelmed and depressed, right? So it's complicated. So easy to get, critical and judgmental of the adult 20-year-old, college kid that seems to blow up his chances as a future pro. Well, why did he blow it up? Well, his conditioning was probably part of it. Now, obviously, whatever the consequence is, he has to pay, right? If he did a crime or whatever, he's going to have to go to jail. We're not going to let him off the hook that way, but we could start to go a little bit deeper and understand, and not put all these athletes on pedestals. Michael Jordan, is a heavy drinker. Like, you see his eyes, they're like, it shows liver toxicity from my perspective, right?
He also
So,
likes to
and he's a
gamble.
gambler. He's a gambler. So why do we have to put Michael Jordan on the pedestal? Is he, I grew up watching him. He's the best, it was a blast.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic too, is that, a lot of part of what forms them and makes them so well could be that stuff that made them impulsive when they were young. The trauma that they went through is what formed them to be such a great athlete or drive them.
Some of these MMA fighters certainly fit that profile, right?
Yeah. And you take Jordan in particular, there's, people, like you said, put him on a pedestal, but you break him down a little bit. He was a little mentally insane when he played. If
you mean he was an asshole?
Well, no, but he would look for reasons to beat you. If you got on the court and you started talking shit to him, that would elevate him and he would get up for that.
Totally.
And if you didn't talk to him, he would start making stuff up in his own brain so he could play better than you. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny how you define crazy, whatever. He would define it as motivation. Right? You insult him and, he's going to make you pay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Good stuff.
And I think one of the things that you touched on, and it's something that I talk with my kids about, is being empathetic about the other people that they come in contact with on a daily basis, because they'll come home from school and tell me that one of their classmates was mean to them or said something to them. I'm like, all right, well, you got to understand, where they're coming from and what might be going on in their household and what they might be dealing with on a daily basis that you don't deal with, because you come from a loving, caring home that has a mother and a father very present in your life. So
yeah, that's a really excellent point, Mark.
And I think, I'm down on vacation, and one of my relatives told me that the number one cause of death between 17 and 24-year-olds right now is suicide.
Yeah.
It just took over homicide. So it's one of those things, I think, because, and I apologize for being out of this for a couple minutes because I was having technical difficulties. But it's one of those things, and it's one of those things that I've really talked about mental health and being empathetic to people and having that mindfulness that you've been talking about and being aware and being present. And it's one of those things that
empathy in particular, Mark, is something that a lot of people don't live and they don't teach, right? And so it's pretty clear to me that if you're teaching that to your children, you're living that, because empathy is almost impossible to teach if you don't live it, right? So that's just great stuff.
Okay.
Really good stuff. Yeah, seriously.
High five to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, one of the things I'm proud of as a male is that I have, the strength to live and teach empathy. And a lot of males don't necessarily, see it that way. Again, we live in a society where a lot of people want to go into finance to make money, to get the woman, to live the lifestyle and so on. And, the teacher is highly devalued in our culture, right? And so, qualities like empathy and understanding, I think are, like, again, showing strength of character and teaching people that, things are complicated, that this kid might be having a bad day or might be having tough issues at home. And, if he's taking it out on you, it's not okay, but it also might not be personal.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely come from a family where my mother and father taught empathy, and we're very aware of that. So, it's something that I'm obviously passing on to my children as well. So,
It's great wiring. So
yeah.
again, that's wiring. And when I talk about wiring, I talk about a combination of your genetics and in your first, formative years. And so you've got wiring for real empathy here, and that's a tremendous quality to live and teach.
Awesome. Final question. You got a seventh, eighth grader, high school age athlete who is pushing themselves. They want to make it to the next level. They're looking for the next arrow in their quiver, and they're considering mindfulness or meditation. Where do they start?
Well, they start with, both. I mean, literally, they start with, focusing more and more energy on the mental game, right? The meditation, the mindfulness, visualization, the breath work, but also the communication skills and the relationship skills and so on. But literally more focus on the mental game in particular. I make fun of most of the athletes I coach in the beginning. A lot of them are specimens. Some of them are like 6'6", 240 with 4.5 speed, that kind of craziness, right? And I'm like, one of my first questions is, how much time do you spend, training? 4 or 5 hours a day is usually the answer, something like that. And I'm like, how much time do you spend on the mental game? And you're lucky if you get 4 or 5 minutes out of them. And then we change that ratio, right? That's my job, is to help them change that ratio. So, from the 4 or 5 minutes to, we're going to put in a lot of time on the mental game, because that usually is what separates, one athlete from the next once they have their physical form intact. Once you have a solid golf swing, it's your mental game that separates you. Same thing for pretty much any sport. Once you have your technicals, reasonably good, they don't have to be perfect, because if you're trying to perfect your technicals, usually that's mental, that's perfectionism, and that's problematic. So really more and more emphasis on the mental game, and then you might actually live to 100 and be happy.
That's the goal.
Well, I think you've probably seen it, especially in the last 2 years, where everybody's living in a sympathetic state. Everybody's doing this, fight or flight response, because that's kind of where our society's been. And I think, as you're talking about mindfulness and breath work and meditation, I think that if you work on it on a daily basis, just like you would train your body, if you can train your mind, it's going to get you back into that parasympathetic state where you can recover at a much higher level from what I've been dealing with, what I've dealt with, what I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, Mark, that's just, perfectly summarized. Good job.
I haven't been on this for a long time, but I've knocked it out of the park when I've been here. I've been present as hell.
That's awesome. Chris, you too, my friend. Always, Chris, it's fun to see you.
I was feeling
I
left out for a minute.
I haven't seen you in like forever.
I know, man. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Hey, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate your friendship through the years. And where can people find you, reach out to you, socials?
Our podcast, our sports psychology podcast, drbrettsjourney.com. So Dr. Brett's with an S, journey.com. And then my website, drbrettdenkin.com. And people can, reach out to me that way. That's probably best. Or they can go to YouTube and do at Dr. Brett Denkin and sign up for our podcast and subscribe and so on. Or you can just contact me at 203-247-2808.
And
I still run my whole life off that Connecticut number.
And they can, it doesn't matter where they are, right? You do a lot of your stuff on
No, it doesn't
video.
really matter. Like I'm doing a lot of life coaching, a lot of guiding. I call myself a high-end mentor guide type. I've got all the credentials and the licenses and so on, but like, really I'm just, mentoring and guiding, the people that are ready, and, we're running a podcast that we really enjoy. I've got a team, and, the lifestyle, the golfing and fishing is just, a lot of fun to live that way. And, you're talking to somebody who's like pretty freaking happily married, which is also, it's such a pleasure, to have a Thai wife that, like we laugh and play together. So it's been a lot of fun. And then we'll be back in Connecticut soon.
That's great. But for you, those of you listening, Dr. Brett, he does, even before the era of Zoom and FaceTime, I remember you teaching, training.
I've been doing phone and FaceTime for 14 years. Yeah. So Zoom to me is just, kind of like this, like someone invented the word Google before they, when they first came out. It's like, it's okay.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on again today, Dr. Brett. We are Athlete Hackers. My name's Chris Schrade. You can find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, a bunch of others. We've got a YouTube channel. If you want to come on the show, email us at info@athletehackers.com.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Oh, that's me now. I am Mark Spellman. That is Dr. Brett. This is you, Chris.
That's me.
We are Athlete Hackers. Appreciate you guys for listening. All my best. God bless. And as always, peace.
Peace.
Peace. Awesome, guys.